For more insight, let's speak now with Mireya Solis. She's the Director of Center for East Asia Policy Studies and Senior Fellow of Foreign Policy Program at the Brookings Institution. And she joins us this morning from Washington, D.C. Mireya, how big a milestone is this summit for improving the bilateral relations? And what are some of the key contributing factors that led to this significant meeting?
Thank you very much. This is a big deal. It's very well known that the bilateral relationship had been very strained, and there could be really a red line in the future, because from the point of view of the Japanese government, if the confiscated assets of Japanese companies as part of this legal case that was heard in the Supreme Court in Korea, if those had been sold off, liquidated, that could actually produce a very serious deterioration. So I think that there was a sense that it was a race against time, and that it was important for both countries to work together because they now live in an increasingly dangerous neighborhood. So you asked me what were the precipitating factors. I would start with that changed geopolitical landscape, the sense that North Korea is now increasingly assertive, is gaining greater capabilities, the uncertainty and unease about China's role in the region, where it's turning towards more coercive behavior, concern also, quite frankly, about the direction, long-term direction of the United States, and the fact that you have these two Asian democracies that share values and that nevertheless have not been able to put those irritants behind them so that they can work together.
Mireya, we have seen a number of deals signed at this summit, an agreement to normalize military intelligence sharing and even dropping a trade dispute. What do you think is the most significant win of this meeting?
Well, I think that it has now created that diplomatic space, and now you have leader-to-leader meetings. And the idea is that now with the reinstatement of shuttle diplomacy, with a very likely possibility that President Yoon will be invited to the G7 that Japan will host the Leaders Summit in May, and that Prime Minister Kishida may visit South Korea in the summer, then this therefore is a huge deliverable, because there had been this freezing at the highest levels of these contacts. Now, there are going to be other deliverables. You mentioned that the export control dispute has now been addressed, but there is a very important area of a foreign economic policy that we refer to as economic security. And when we mention that term, we're thinking, of course, about technology competition, export controls, supply chain resilience. And this opens the possibility to have a bilateral dialogue, and that was one of the accomplishments of this visit, but also a trilateral dialogue as well that includes the United States. So when you have these countries thinking about what is the future of the region, what is the future of the relationship with China, how should we continue to have these very robust economic interaction with China, but also prevent against the risks of technological leakage and so forth, this then opens that possibility to coordinate between these two countries and also with the United States.
But Mireya, how sustainable do you think this normalization of ties would be, given that they have previously failed in the past? And what are some of the anticipated challenges or the key barriers in overcoming this prolonged strain in their relations?
Well, I think that you have hit the key question. And there's a lot of burnout, if I would put it that way, fatigue, if you will, because we've seen previous breakthroughs being rolled back because they were not considered or legitimate in South Korea. They did not have strong support in South Korea. So when we see some of the public opinion coming out just after President Yoon announced these package to address the forced labor issue, the public in South Korea is not very supportive. And South Korea has very polarized domestic politics. So in the next election, if the opposition party then wins that election, how will they take on, will they continue to abide by this deal or not, is a huge question mark. It's very, I think, striking to note that the reception in Japan is very different. The public, by and large, welcomes this development. And I think it really reflects that it is really the South Korean side, President Yoon, who has made the utmost effort in putting this labor compensation issue in the front burner. And as you mentioned in the clip before we started this conversation, the Japanese government has taken a very cautious attitude. So whether this is enough for eventually the South Korean public to believe that it is better to be looking at the future of a relationship with Japan in addressing these very present geopolitical and geoeconomic challenges is, I think, the big question mark going forward. For that reason, I think it's very important, for example, that some Japanese companies or the Business Federation really make a goodwill effort and try to provide funds either to that foundation that will address the labor issue or that other initiative that is about youth and exchange programs for the young. So I think that that's another element that needs to come into place, that the South Korean public sees a real effort from some of the Japanese stakeholders, and then you can begin to see perhaps a turn in public opinion in South Korea.
We're running out of time right now, but I want your thoughts on North Korea. Hours before the summit opened, North Korea fired another long-range ballistic missile. What further reaction do you expect to see from Pyongyang as ties between Japan and South Korea grow stronger?
Well, they're certainly not happy. But I think that by taking that action, just as the leaders of South Korea and Japan were meeting, they're sort of reinforcing the logic behind this rapprochement, the desire to have a more functional, closer relationship between these two Asian democracies. So I think that it was actually a very striking demonstration as to why it is important for South Korea and Japan to come together. And, this Yoon-Kishida meeting took place as a consequence of a lot of dialogues that have been taking place because of the need to deal with North Korea and the the strategic necessity to share this intelligence information regarding the missile and nuclear capabilities of North Korea. So I think that North Korea is creating an incentive for Japan and South Korea to come closer.
All right, Mireya, thank you very much for your time and your expertise this morning. Mireya Solis from the Brookings Institution.